Hello everyone, today we're going to be reviewing the film Tetris, which just released this weekend on Apple TV+. I initially didn't really plan to watch and review this movie because it's a streaming original, and I tend to gravitate towards watching and really becoming engaged with movies in the theater. But for the sake of it, I saw it was on Apple TV and I was like, whatever, I guess I'll check it out. I don't really know anything about the real life story behind this movie. I didn't before watching it. I still don't. I haven't really done my research as to how factually accurate this movie is. So this is going to be just my interpretation solely from what the movie gives me. And one thing that's clear watching this movie is that it's not meant to be taken completely factual. There's definitely a lot of fictional elements added to this. Anyways, in this movie, Taron Egerton plays Hank Rogers. He's sort of this entrepreneur in the 80s going around trying to secure rights to upcoming video games. He eventually discovers that the game's developer actually lives in Russia, and then he travels there, and thus the conflict ensues as he sort of battles with various other entities to obtain the rights to this game, as well as the Game Boy console that it would eventually release on as a handheld. I actually did own a Game Boy back in the day, so seeing that was definitely a little bit nostalgic. But right off the bat, I'll say that this movie didn't really hold my attention very well. I'm surprised looking at all the critical praise that it's received. And again, that's not to diminish what anybody else thought watching the movie. This is just my own personal thoughts. If you enjoyed the movie, I'm happy for you. But for me, this just turned into a boring snooze fest after about the first half hour or so. The first half hour had me intrigued. At the start, he's at this trade show in Las Vegas, and you see him first discover Tetris and sort of like shrugging it off as if it's nothing, and then he sits down and plays it and realizes, oh my god, this thing is masterful. And it's just really cool. This is like the origin story that I really wish was good because I never knew I wanted to see it this badly. I think where this movie really goes wrong is that it's trying to be two different things at once. On one hand, it's trying to be a biopic. On the other hand, it's trying to be almost a Soviet-era spy thriller of sorts. Not precisely, but in the third act, it goes in a completely different direction than I expected. That sort of involves a little bit more, I guess you could say, Hollywood-ish, sort of over-stylized with action sequences. And those two just don't mix together well. I will say I really like the soundtrack. I really like some of the stylistic choices in this movie. It looks good for being low budget. And in terms of stylistic choices, there will be sequences where Hank is explaining a character's backstory, somebody who's going to be sort of a main player in this feud. And we see that play out in the 8-bit format, and then it sort of transitions to live action. That was a really cool idea. They do that a lot. They also use that to sort of transition between scenes, which is cool. But again, a stylistic choice doesn't mean as much to me as having a good script, and I think this movie just kind of lacks that. A lot of the dialogue sort of felt AI generated. It didn't feel like something that people would actually be saying. Taron Egerton is great. He's definitely a very underrated actor. I loved him in Rocket Man, among many other projects. I just don't feel that he was given that much to chew on here. His family sort of adds to his character a little bit in the fact that he's sort of the underdog in this scenario. One thing I sort of wonder and want to research is whether or not this dude was actually this much of an idiot in real life, because when he travels to Russia, he seems to have very little regard for sort of what the Soviet Union is like. Whatever the case, maybe that is true to real life, but he just did not seem prepared when he travels there. The actual developer of Tetris, Alexei, was a really nice character. He sort of forms this friendship with Hank that I really enjoyed. Probably one of the best sort of character interactions in the movie. But otherwise, man, this movie is just so devoid of energy in terms of the storytelling. It just felt kind of boring to me. Another flaw that I have is that sometimes I think they go a little overboard with the sort of pixelated scenes, switching back and forth between that and live action. I'm going to give a specific example. This is a very mild spoiler, but there's a car chase in the third act of this movie, and during that scene, it switches back and forth between like a pixelated road with like 8-bit cars driving along the road to live action, and it kind of felt too silly to me. It took me out of the moment. It's like this movie doesn't know whether to be serious or comedic or both. I did enjoy some of the dry humor in this, but it just felt a little bit out of place for a movie that's mostly about signing contracts and planning business ventures. It's just, nothing really jumped out to me and was like, yes, this is why the backstory behind the creation and distribution of Tetris is something that we need to see on a big screen. Again, I'm not really trying to make this a long video. I know a lot of people are really enjoying this movie. It's getting a lot of critical praise. I just didn't like it as much as everybody else and sort of felt like I was the only one who was feeling that way. I know this is a bit of a short one, but I'm going to give this movie 2.5 out of 5. Not terrible, just sort of felt tonally inconsistent to me, and a lot of chunks of the movie were just boring sort of negotiations and nothing really interesting happening, even though the cast does a serviceable job. And some of the stylistic choices were interesting, to say the least. So guys, if you have seen Tetris, do let me know in the comments if you liked it like a majority of people are, or if, like me, you thought it was a little bit overrated. As always, be sure to like and subscribe if you want to see more videos like this, and I will see you guys in the next one. Thanks for watching.